right, good morning everyone. Welcome to the Quha Puff switches webinar. And my name is Petri Latva-Rasku. I'm responsible for Quha marketing activities. And during this webinar, feel free to send us questions either using email by sending the question to webinar@quha.com or using the YouTube live chat. And we will try to answer those questions after the webinar. So the webinar format is relatively quick, so it will take about 15 minutes to go through the puff switches, and after the 15 minutes we'll answer your questions. So number one, what are puff switches? So puff switches are switches which are activated by a puff, and a puff is something that you make with your breathing. So basically it's an airflow that is coming from your mouth, and that can be used to activate a switch, and the switch can be then used for any purpose. There are two different types of puff switches. We have contactless puff switches where the user is actually not touching the switch itself. So there is some distance between the switch and the user. That is a very hygienic solution. And then there is a other possibility where the switches are actually physically touching the user, for example, through a mouthpiece that the user has in the mouth. So those are the main forms of different switches. And without further ado, I will go through the different switches that our company Quha manufactures. So you probably have heard of the Quha Sento. Sento is this part. There is the airflow sensor here, or the puff sensor. Then there is the gooseneck here, which can be twisted to suit anyone. And it is connected in this case to the headband. And here we have the Quha Zono. Actually, in this case, this is the Quha Zono 2 mouse. It also works with Quha Zono 1. And it is connected here so that the mouse left click will be performed by this sensor. And at this stage, I would like to show different possibilities. So in the first one, it was connected to the Quha headband. And in this case, we have the neckband, which comes behind the user's head here, like this. So you can also use this one. There is a specific light eyeglass clip with the attachment part for the Sento arm here. So Sento can also be used with this one. And then we have the third alternative. This is the Quha Nemo with Sento. It looks similar to headband, but this actually has a very nice feature of having a magnetic charging dock here, which has a camera thread, so one 1/4 inch camera thread, which means that it can be connected to most attachment arms. And when this is connected to an attachment arm, charging the Quha Zono is extremely simple. You just put it here. So with this one, with Quha Nemo, you never have to disconnect any cables. So it is just automatically charged when connected to the dock. So extremely useful, and this works identically in other manners. So the left click can be performed by a puff to the sensor. And perhaps at this stage I would like to demonstrate how this works. But first, number one is that I will just show how the Quha Sento, you would kind of position it correctly. So in this case, I'm using the headband. So I'm placing it here. And the next thing for me to do would be to place the sensor to a position where I can easily puff into it. So typically that would be a couple of centimeters from my lips to the forward. And then there is also a possibility of maybe putting it slightly downwards, because this is an airflow sensor here, and it will detect also my airflow when I'm speaking. So in that respect, it might be more useful to put it here, because then by twisting lips a little bit, it would still be possible to puff here. But for demonstration, I will try not to speak too much here, but I will just place it there. And then I suppose you can all see my screen at the moment. Yeah. And you can see that when I'm now moving my head, the cursor moves, and then when I make a puff, then something's happened. For example, if I can click there and it opens the page here. And a long click would be just puffing longly. That way I can also drag items like that. That's as simple as that. There were no drivers, nothing. So we just connected this device to the computer and it worked like that. And I guess this is, I will just be very brief. So I think this is what I wanted to demonstrate about how it works. So you can see that it's very simple, very quick. Things are just easy with this external switch, Sento. Okay. Then for those people who have some difficulties in using a contactless sensor, because it's not always so simple to, I mean, I know that there are many users who have difficulties in kind of pinpointing the puff so that it would hit the sensor. So there is also another alternative. This is the Quha Pufo Plus, and Pufo Plus is something that it looks very, very similar to Quha Zono mouse. It has a similar way of attaching it. And in this case, there is the replaceable mouthpiece that is connected here. We also sell these mouthpieces externally, because this is the part that usually, because this puff switch is something that you place in your mouth. So there is saliva, and it after a while it gets dirty. So this is something that you want to replace. There are no kind of serviceable components inside the switch itself, but you can replace the mouthpiece here very easily. And they are basically pipes like this or mouthpieces like this, and they can be bought from Quha. And there are different possibilities of attaching this to the Zono. So the obvious solution is to use the Zono so that we will use the neckband. So in this case, we would just place the Pufo here and then connect it to the Zono, and then you would put it here, and you will just find a nice position so that you can place it in your mouth. And then when you puff into the mouthpiece, there will be a click. When you kind of push the pressure to the pipe a longer time, then the left mouse button remains kind of depressed. So you are just able to do dragging movements or long presses. There is also another possibility if you do not want to use this, or if you prefer to use a different method. We have a special form of the headband where the leftmost part is replaced with a plastic piece similar to what we have in the neckband. So in this case, you would be able to connect the Pufo to the left side of the headband, and then you will just connect the cable to the Zono, and this way you would be able to use it in the similar manner. So this way you have the possibility of using different wearing options with Pufo Plus also. So those are the possibilities. So maybe if we are thinking about the differences between these switches, I think that this is maybe a little bit more sensitive in the sense that you only need a very, very faint puff and you can still make clicks. So with Sento, of course, depending on the distance between the sensor and your lips, you can have an effect on the sensitivity. But in general, I think this is a little bit more sensitive. We sell a fair amount of both switches, so it looks that we have found, so there are users for both of these solutions. So they are both extremely accurate and good switches. All right. And then we also have another switch, which is actually a very generic switch. This switch has a standard 3.5 millimeter connector. So this is something, it has a Sento arm. This is called Sento MP, Sento multipurpose. And this is something that has the 1/4 inch camera thread, so you can attach it easily to any mount. And then you can connect it to, basically because this is the standard 3.5 millimeter connector, you can connect it to basically wherever you want to connect the switch. And in this case, I don't know if you can hear this, but when I puff here, it makes a small buzzer sound, which you can actually turn on or off. There is also a sensitivity selection here, so depending on your puff switch, this is something that you can use for a nurse call. You can use this for environment control. You can use this with for example, if you have a different type of a mouse, for example, if you are using an eye gaze device, this is something that you can use to make clicks for those devices. So it's a basically very generic multi-purpose switch that can be used for anything that switches are in general used. This is extremely useful. All right. So those were the switches that we manufacture and have designed. About the compatibility, all these switches are compatible with all the operating systems that you would generally use. They are compatible with Windows, they are compatible with Macs. If you have a Linux system, yes, it is compatible. If you have an iPad, if you have an iPhone, if you have an Android smartphone, if you have an Android tablet, it is plug and play on all these systems. So basically you can move your cursor and you can make a click by using those puff switches. You don't need any drivers. Everything just works when you plug it in. We have adapters for different types of USB ports. So all those devices that I mentioned have some sort of USB ports, and there are adapters for every single one. So you can use those devices as plug and play devices with Quha Zono or Zono 2 mouse. So just to recap, what are the benefits to the users? So this is an extremely quick way of making clicks. So I'm sure that many of you know how troublesome or tiresome or slow it can be to use dual clicking software for something, because you always have to wait for something to happen. And with a physical switch, you never have to wait. You just puff and you get your click immediately. And it is completely independent of the operating system, so it works on all the systems which you are using. Additionally, the useful feature is that you don't have to use dual clicking software. You can use dual clicking software, of course, in combination with this mouse. For example, dual clicking software can be very useful because it sometimes has nice shortcuts to activate certain features like quick start applications, or you can scroll very easily. It is very, very useful in some cases. And those are pretty much the benefits to the user. At this point, I think I have used my 15 minutes here. So I would like to hear if there are any questions from our listeners.
Yes. How do you clean the puff switches?
So the question was, how do we clean the puff switches? So the basic answer is that for Pufo Plus, you would typically replace the mouthpiece, because that is the one that probably gets dirty first. And for all the other switches, they are made of plastic which is resistant or resilient to ethanol-based cleaning substances. That means that is something that is very typically available in many places for cleaning or in some cases disinfection. So you can use that. The plastic will not get harmed. But with ethanol, make sure that you don't put it into the electronics part, because electronics is typically not resistant to ethanol-based cleaning substances. You can also use typical food safe cleaning agents to clean the plastic parts, but stay away from the electronics, because that is something that you pretty much cannot clean yourself. So.
Okay, then what about right clicking? Can you right click with these puff switches?
Yeah, the question was if you can make right clicks with these puff switches. So puff switches are something that, as you notice, that we have one sort of sensor for everything. So whether it is a Sento or Pufo Plus, so you have the possibility of making the right click either by connecting a physical switch to the USB receiver. That way you can put it there and you can actually configure what you want to do with that switch which is connected there. Or then another possibility is to use any 12 clicking software in combination with these puff switches. They all give the possibility of making a right click if you need that. All right. Any other questions?
No, that's all.
All right. I think that that is all the questions we had. And since our webinar format is compact and fast, I will stop here, and you all will get a link to this webinar. So if you know anyone who is interested in this one, feel free to forward that link to that person so they can also watch this webinar and perhaps gain some useful information. So thank you everyone, and see you again in other Quha webinars.